think as data becomes a new storefront, what does that mean for businesses that traditionally relied on physical websites or physical presence?
So there's a lot I could unpack there, but I'll focus on, again, back to basics. At Loblaw, we've been on this long journey to have all of our data in the cloud. An agentic system to any kind of APIs. A lot of companies are now facing this first hurdle of how do I actually get access to my data, and kind of facing that cloud journey by force. So I think that would be step one, getting into where does my data live today? Is it accessible by agentic systems or any systems whatsoever? Next step, how does your data talk to these new modes of access? So it's not just you holding the reins on what that experience looks like from a website or an app perspective. Now you need to be able to have your data conversable with agents. So we have a whole team, how we've approached it, looking at making our websites accessible, so agentic ready. Previously, for example, we blocked all bot traffic. So that was a hurdle. Like, okay, there's good bots and there's bad bots. And how do we make sure the good bots can come in? And what is that traffic going to look like? We have no idea. How do we make sure the traffic doesn't take our website down? Are we ready for that? So I think there's like a series of questions you have to think through. And then to an earlier point around, is this a fad or not? We don't really know what these numbers are going to look like. So how do you make those decisions around how many people do I want from my e-com team to be focused on agentic shopping and agentic optimization as opposed to traditional SEO? So I think there's a lot of people asking really big questions right now, but you go back to, is my data where I need it to be? And are we accessible in the way that these new agents are going to be conversing with it?
Very, very insightful, especially around getting the gravity of data and then also the unification of data across channels. So Bernard, I would love to get your take on this as well.
So I admire quite a bit what Loblaw is doing in the level of preparedness. I had the pleasure of actually talking to her about, how they're getting prepared. I'm going to take a couple steps back. Many of you have had exposure to AI, have already jumped into it. I believe that we need to understand if we are ready and where we are as an organization, as a business, where you're at. So I look at five pillars. And the first question I actually start by asking myself or any business owner that we talk to is, if 1,000 AI agents showed up at your doorstep tomorrow at 2 a.m., would you be able, and your systems be able to handle this kind of traffic? Because I know we will be talking about GEO, the evolution of SEO. Tom's going to be talking about that. But this is where we're going. So the first thing is, could we complete transactions without human assistance? Second piece is our system resilience. To the first point is, are your systems ready to handle this type of activity? And where are they today? Because that will be the foundation as to where we go tomorrow. I also like to look at the unit economics, and that is understanding what a transaction is costing today. Before we can start thinking about the future, we need to really understand the economics today. 90%, and not just what that payment transaction costs, but what does it cost from the time that someone says, I want to buy your product, to the payment gets processed, to it hits the bank, to it gets reconciled, and everything in between. When something breaks and there's a human in the middle, what is the cost of that? Because things will change once AI agents are hitting our storefront.
Shift gears a little bit to something that we alluded to earlier around payments infrastructure when we talk about payments. So Tom, I would love to get your take with your experience at MasterCard around, as decision-making becomes a lot more automated, which we've been talking about, what role do you think payments, trust, and digital infrastructure play in enabling the shift?
Yeah, well, this is my chance to do a history lesson, because I love that. So, MasterCard has been at the center of the payment ecosystem for well over half a century, right? Back then, you may have had a merchant ask, should I give my good or service to this individual that just showed up with a piece of plastic, right? Or you as a customer might have thought, can I put my 16-digit PAN, the primary account number and CVV and expiry date in some website? Or is my card going to be safe in Apple Pay? Or a bank might ask, should I authorize this transaction, which was made not by my cardholder, by my customer, right? And the answer tended to be yes, because that issuer, that bank, that merchant, that customer saw that MasterCard logo and it made them feel safe, right? This is no different. We are in an area where trust and safety is the main role that MasterCard, other networks as well, will bring to this ecosystem. And that is ultimately what will drive growth.
So important. And Samir, we'd love to get your take on that as well.
Yeah, I think from the payments perspective, I always see it as the verifier that everything else is working in the system. So if I think about, the product journey, adding to a cart, shipping details and everything, it's really that green check at the end when the payment happens that you feel that everybody before you acted the way they were supposed to, or that you filled out every required detail, there's no missing fields, and your order is going to go through. So really payments, or that exchange of value, is the confirmation that everything else in the system is working, at least from a customer's point of view, even from a business as they receive those orders. And as a network, you have like logos of trust, and like fortunately I know we talked about brand, is like it's great working for a brand that's been around for 40 plus years. You don't have to prove your trustworthiness. It's gonna show in the 40 years of legacy. But as you're thinking about it from like a business standpoint, you really have to inject yourself in that trust equation, and how are you delivering trust along that value chain or along that journey?
Yeah.
If I may just add a couple things. So in this era of agentic commerce, I believe trust is the currency. In the past, it was, again, you knew who your customer was. You can verify. You can, there's all different kinds of tech, like 3DS2 that is widely used in Europe. But now it's, I know quite a bit of the technology that MasterCard's coming up with verifiable intent. The intent of being able, and the goal of being able to track that transaction from the time that a human decides to, I'm going to search for this, until they hit that button through a couple bots probably, all the way back to the agent. And being able to track that today is, we spent, nearly 50 years perfecting what that looks like. Now we're putting that to the test, because this is a completely new infrastructure ecosystem that organizations like MasterCard and Interact have to re-engineer how their networks work in order to actually deal with a new consumer and be able to verify all the way down to the transaction and say, well, what happens if there's a return? Who really authorized that? Who was where, like who issued the mandate? So there's a lot of new concepts that, the payment networks, and I just think that they are foundational to the success of agentic commerce. And I give a lot of credit, because they have a lot to rebuild and to prepare for this new generation of commerce.
I know that there was a lot of discussion, I guess a little bit of discussion about compliance and security. And as we're looking into agentic e-commerce, with the recent data breaches that we've seen within the last 3 weeks, including Versal, and most recently with education data, and even Salesforce had like 4 breaches in the last 2 years. How are your companies looking to kind of approach the potential of security risks, especially when we're talking about financial data in this world of agentic AI? Like, I know that Chrissy was talking about the fact that, well, you're allowing more bots in order to allow for agentic AI, but that also increases security risks.
That's an uphill battle. So as I was mentioning, and again, we track a lot of data in terms of compliance and who's compliant, who's not compliant. I personally don't feel that the market as a whole is ready yet to embrace agentic commerce from a compliance and specifically from a security perspective. We talk about the security vectors that are being, surfacing as a result of AI. They are multiplying. In fact, one of our businesses is about testing LLM models for the enterprise, both from the commerce side and non-commerce side. again, if we take the current standard, PCI compliance standard, we survey the whole Canadian space, I would say that maybe about 12 to 15%, because we just took some data, probably 1,000 different companies, will actually say that with confidence they are PCI compliant. This is going to be a requirement. If you want to jump into that, otherwise you're taking a lot of risk. So again, this is going to be more, it's about awareness. It's going to be about, again, one of the 5, dimensions that I discussed was about being ready, looking, introspecting as to where we're ready for that. But I am concerned. I am concerned that even with the today's commerce model of websites, of TAP, the majority of merchants are not PCI compliant. They don't understand it. They don't understand about their obligations to the card brands. If you read a merchant agreement, it says if you're not PCI compliant, within 90 days, you own all the risk. And people still sign off on that and go about, and nobody wants to own it. So it's a culture change. And hopefully, I'm really optimistic in this, is that as the awareness component of the risks that are brought by agentic, organizations, their leaders, their owners will become more aware of the importance of being compliant and the importance of making security the #1 priority before you start deploying any of these systems.